The summer breeze blew through my thick mess of bedhead as I took in the morning sunlight. Breathing in deeply and exhaling slowly, I mentally prepared myself for the day. I worked from home, which is a plus considering the world that we live in at the moment. So it would be another day of sitting in front of the computer, cursing at the screen, and the bad sense of humor that technology had when I needed it to function properly. I had a pretty standard idea of how my day was going to go. Take in the morning air, grab a cup of coffee with my favorite Skull coffee mug, pull up a seat in front of my laptop and get through the day. I was mentally prepared to spend the day alone, as I had lived alone for many years and had never really been one for human interaction, even before social distancing. That's why it came as such a shock when I found a nasty little surprise in my driveway. In my backyard was a driveway, which was quite muddy, and there was a set of footprints, which were clearly not my own. I stood frozen in shock as I followed the footsteps, which led directly to my back door and into my house. Slowly, I peeked inside, trying to see if I could notice any signs of recent activity. The house was still quite dark, save for the sunlight that came in through the windows. I couldn't see nor hear anything out of the ordinary. I made my way into the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find. I was not going to be intimidated or scared out of my own home. When it comes to my property, I defended viciously, and some home invasion would be no exception. Whoever was in my house was surely going to regret it to their last breath. Armed and ready to strike, I slowly made my way throughout the house, making sure to stay as quiet as I could be. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a door slamming upstairs. I became alert but kept my cool as I slowly crept up the stairs. One step at a time, I slowly ascended, still listening for additional sounds. When I made it to the second floor, I searched around and found that all of the doors were open except for one, my bedroom. Carefully, methodically, I reached out my hand to the doorknob, keeping the knife raised in position ready to stab. I grabbed a hold of it, turning it slowly as I swallowed in anticipation. I took a deep breath, ready for anything. Quickly, I swung the door open and ready to strike at nothing. I took a step back, completely confused, and suddenly, the world went black. I awoke to find myself bound and gagged. My head was pounding and my vision was blurry. Suddenly, an image appeared before me, still too blurry to make out any features. All I could see was a dark silhouette standing over me, the sunlight shining brightly behind them. The person just stood there for the longest time, staring at me, studying me. Eventually, my vision adjusted itself, and I saw who it was that stood before me. There was a young man, dressed in a black t-shirt and pajama pants. There was something familiar about him, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. My head was killing me and I couldn't think straight, but I knew that I had seen this person before. I stared at him, examining every feature that I could see, trying to piece together just who this stranger was that had invaded my home and done this to me. His hair was thick and unkempt, his eyes deep brown with rings under them. There was no expression on his face, not a smile nor a scowl. It was just expressionless. He was dirty, as though he had slept outside for over a week or more. I struggled to be released from my bonds, but there was no hope. The ropes around me were thin, but tied in such a secure way that there was no way of getting free. And as I struggled, they dug into me. The sock that was stuffed into my mouth as a gag tasted disgusting. It made it hard to breathe as well. There was no getting out of this. I was completely bound and helpless, at the absolute mercy of this stranger. He then shook his head slowly and spoke for the first time. "My home," he said in a low, raspy voice. He then bent down and picked up what appeared to be a large shovel. He stepped aside, and I noticed a large mound of dirt. I muffled out a distressed scream through my gag as he picked me up and carried me over to a large hole he had dug for me. As he carried me over, I spotted what appeared to be 3 more recently buried holes, and I knew exactly where I was. I looked up to confirm and realized that I was indeed in the backyard of my home. As I continued to struggle, I flailed like a wild fish until I managed to slam my head into his face, feeling the crunch of his nose. He let out a pained groan as he dropped me and his shovel. Clearly disoriented from the blow to his face, he lost his balance and toppled over into the very hole he had dug for me. As he fell, I heard a loud scream, as well as intense crying that indicated that he was in excruciating pain. Still bound, I wiggled and rolled around until I noticed the shovel right beside me. I maneuvered to where the rope was against the sharp part of the shovel and quickly began to cut myself free. The stranger was still screaming as I did this, so I didn't bother rushing as I knew he must have broken something during his sudden fall. Eventually, my bonds were released and I stood to my feet. Triumphantly, I stood over the hole where I watched the stranger writhe in pain as bone protruded from both of his legs. He then looked up at me, no longer expressionless, but full of rage and hate. He spat at me, continued to scream as I gripped the shovel. I could no longer hold in the smirk that appeared on my face. This was just all too amusing. "So," I said to him, "who exactly might you be?" He said nothing at first, but eventually answered, "Matt, their son, his brother." It then all clicked, and everything made sense. That hole wasn't dug by him. It was dug by me, for him. The blow to my head must have clouded my memory of the night before, but it all began to slowly return to me. I had just moved in last night. I had never cared to be around other people, so I couldn't have some other family living in my home. So I removed them. I smothered each of them in their sleep and buried them in the backyard. There was a mother, a father, and 2 sons, one a teenager and the other being this older one. He apparently hadn't died as I thought when I buried him, which, frankly, is oddly careless of me. This, after all, was by no means my first time securing a home and eliminating the unwanted residents. This was something I had done for years, so to make such a careless error was something I would beat myself up over for a while. I looked at him with pity, as he continued to stare at me with contempt. "Right," I said to him as I took the shovel and began to throw clumps of dirt into the hole. He did not scream any longer, nor did he cry from fear or pain. He knew that he was done for, so he sat there, chin up, and let it happen. As the dirt became higher and higher, I could see the look of fear forming in his eyes. They watered as the moist earth covered his neck, then his mouth, then his nose. He squeezed his eyes shut as they too were covered. and I could faintly hear the muffled sounds of panic. Finally, the last of it was thrown in, and his beautiful grave was covered once more. I brushed the dirt off of my clothes and made my way back inside. I brewed a pot of coffee and poured some into my favorite Skull coffee mug. I fired up my laptop, ready to get to work. To my delight, everything worked out great. The internet connection, as well as the VPN. I pulled up the list of homes, trying to decide where I would go next.